neighborhood Spider-Man.
And just like that, the Watching Comics podcast is back, coming at you with a special festive turkey celebration.
Yeah, I'd like you to picture Mitch and I wearing traditional colonial garb. I currently have on a black hat and some very square-toed boots. I'm in the spirit of things and ready to celebrate.
But do your square-toed boots have the buckle, the gold square buckle?
Certainly.
Okay.
They certainly buckle because for a simple man like me, laces are just they're not an option.
Yeah, the buckle is swagtastic, and I feel like we should bring that back. I get that the colonial folks weren't exactly, kind, and that the country that we are dwelling in isn't exactly, we didn't exactly come here like on good terms, but
yeah,
just from a sheer superficial fashion statement point, I'm team buckle, like on the shoes. I think we could do that. I think it could have a moment again. It's been long enough. I think it's time to bring it back.
Yeah, even a blind squirrel finds a nut, or in this case, a smallpox-ridden blanket can find some fashion. And I think it works. Can I tell you, I'm going to have a moment of, I really wrestled with whether to say this on air today, Thanksgiving. I'm going to do it. And I'm going to admit to something that I have tried to keep on the down low for about 4 or 5 months now. I recently, for health reasons, went vegan. And by recently, I mean July. And when I made that decision, part of the process was I said, okay, and when holidays come, I am throwing that out the window for a few days. And so today, for the first time, Mitch, since July, I ate meat and I ate cheese and I ate dairy. And say what you will about America, but we know how to use those things. And it was a good day, Mitch, and I am excited to just annihilate a turkey by myself tomorrow.
So for 24 hours, you're pushing the vegan off the cliff. And
and then I will go atone, and I'll resume all of my health conscious stuff, and it has been very successful for me. But for a few days here, I'm going to be a little bit unhealthy, and I am excited.
There is an admirable quality to going back to your roots of just, sheer gluttonous celebration of all that food. Does it get any more American than that? The answer is no.
No, absolutely not.
I think I admire you for doing that, and I totally understand the whole vegan thing, health reasons thing. You got to do what you got to do. Recently, a little over a year ago, I did something similar where I didn't go full vegan because I'm not that radical, but I did go through a major life change as far as how I was eating and treating my body and everything like that, and dropped over 30 pounds that have kept it off for the course of a year. And so it's the same type of thing where, okay, the holidays are here, and now I'm ready for my small window of permitted gorging.
Right.
Because it's like the one time I can do it guilt-free, so I might as well do it and, throw caution to the wind. And it's what I was born to do, whether I deprive myself of it or not. It's what I was born to do.
Yeah, I hear that. I'm right there with you, man.
Rock on. So now that we've covered our Weight Watchers let's talk
about Daredevil.
Let's talk about Daredevil. Okay, so quick little recap. We are a week behind on our normal scheduling because last week, due to the unplanned circumstances and just the Herculean mammoth icon, mythic hero amazingness that was Stan Lee, we felt like he deserved some FaceTime and deserved, at least for us to feebly do our very best to shout him out in a podcast episode and talk about the legacy that he's left behind and how much he has touched us. So that's why, if you were just catching up, maybe why you've been waiting for 2 weeks to get the end of our Daredevil thoughts. I know that people have been probably sitting on the edge of their seats wanting to know, did we still like Daredevil?
Yeah, I'm on the edge of my seat wanting to know what I thought of Daredevil. So I can only imagine what it's like for all of the listeners.
I know, right? So we're about to flesh this whole thing out. So if you haven't caught the first episode, two episodes back, we did the first half of Daredevil Season 3, did a quick recap on that. So feel free to take a jaunt back to the earlier episode and listen to what we thought about the first 6 episodes. Spoiler alert, we liked them a lot.
Yeah.
So here we are, ready to cap it all off. So Jake, before we get into the nitty gritty, I want to tell you, because we didn't cover this in our production meeting. Our production meeting was really short this week. So I want to talk to you about just initial impressions, maybe your biggest takeaway from the latter portion of the season, and if you have any biggest complaints. And then I've got a couple of other questions I want to sprinkle in there, but I'm just really intrigued to hear what you think about a couple of those things. So first of all, just general thoughts. How did the season end up for you? How do you feel? Where does this rest for you in the pantheon of Netflix Marvel series and the like?
So for me, this is, I think, so big picture. Let me do big picture first. Big picture, I am content to say that this is my favorite season yet of Daredevil. I don't think it quite catches up to what I think is the gold standard of the Defenders shows, which is Jessica Jones, but it's very close. And I will tell you then, my big gripe is what stops it from catching up to me is a really genuinely bad final episode, like a shockingly out of nowhere, like Mitch, I don't know how else to say it. I got iron fisted in the last few minutes there of this show. We were doing so well, and it caught me so off guard because it had gone so well. I thought so highly of it. I'm right there with, the 8.7 that I'm looking at on net or IMDb right now. I feel is low for the whole series. And then that last episode catches me so off guard because it's so bad, man. It's like they wrote, I don't know. I didn't see it coming. They were doing so well. It's such a great season still. It did not ruin the season for me. Let me be really clear on that I would sit down and watch the whole thing over again. But in 3 seasons of TV, this was the only episode of Daredevil that I thought was a legitimately bad episode. And they couldn't stick the landing. I don't know. Am I off base? How'd you feel about it?
Okay, so I'm really interested. I'm fascinated by that. I wasn't expecting that statement, but I
You weren't expecting me to say iron fisted.
Well, I mean, that just straight up needs to be on a bumper sticker and on a T-shirt. We need to make T-shirts that said "I was iron fisted tonight."
God help us if there's ever a watching comics store.
You know what? Maybe we should. Hey, so quick. Jake, may I have a sidebar?
Mm-hmm.
Sidebar. Okay. Hit us up, listeners, on the Twitters, the Instas. If you would like watching comics swag, let us know, and we can make it happen.
Because right. I've got an iron, and I know where to find some iron-on letters, and I would be happy to hand make you an I Got Iron Fisted T-shirt.
Oh, my gosh. A one-of-a-kind. Oh, Jake,
Every one of them will be...
We may have stumbled upon...
I'll misspell it on some.
You'd have to.
I'll even forge the signature of whatever celebrity you want onto it.
You'd have to use the R reversed, of course. I feel like that would be like a good calling card.
Oh, we are going to regret this episode in a few months, aren't we?
Watching comic swag coming at you. Well, ultimately, Jake, is you're just going to create a bunch of extra work for yourself because the droves are going to come in.
I'll just outsource it. I have children.
They're going to demand their child slave labor threads. Okay.
Yeah, but let's talk about the episode.
Here's the deal. I was following along on social media, as one does, and reading a couple of trusted, at least in my opinion, trusted periodical sites as I'm making my way through the season. And there seemed to be an awful lot of common verbiage stating that Season 3 of Daredevil may be the single greatest season of comic book television, at least, since we've kind of hit this renaissance of it. And I could see why they were saying that until the final episode. And then it seems like the final episode is the big polarizing point between a lot of people, myself included. So here's the deal. I don't know if I'm willing to call the final episode bad, because I think maybe it could be a larger problem with, ironically, as strong as the show is and as strong as the season in particular is. I think maybe could we just say that the one weak point about Daredevil is that maybe the writers and the showrunners have just not been able to cement the true identity of what they want Matt Murdock to be and his journey to be, to make it cohesive enough to be more than just a really, 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 really long origin story. Like it seems like at the end of season 3, we're still getting this point where like the big culmination moment is supposed to be this fight, which was a touch lackluster compared to some of the other action sequences. We can talk about that later. And then it almost was like the Batman versus Superman Martha moment, where it was like Murdock had Kingpin on the ropes and could have done it, could have ended the whole thing. And then he's got this moment of heart and just makes this bold declaration of like, I'm not gonna be that man. It's supposed to be this big revelation, but then you realize we've been watching him for 3 years try to figure out if he's going to be the man without fear or if he's going to be a man with an awful lot of fear. And he finally had that moment, and it just wasn't that great of a payoff. And then the decision is just to send Kingpin back to prison on a cool little buddy-buddy deal. Now, of course, I'm oversimplifying. And like you said, Jake, I don't want this to diminish how much I love this season, because I did. And I don't even know if I want to call this last episode bad, but it definitely ended weaker than I thought it was going to, considering that this season was like such straight fire from a cannon.
I think, to summarize where I'm at with it, I felt like this season in its final episode had the opposite problem, like the total inverse of Luke Cage, where Luke Cage season 2 to me hit some really great big moments, but it didn't earn them in the nitty gritty and in the small moments. Whereas I felt like this season of Daredevil spent 12 episodes earning whatever it wanted. And I didn't know where they were taking all of this, but I knew it had to be awesome. And then it ended up just being a really neat, we're going to put a bow on everything, put all of our toys back in the toy box, and it's all going to end exactly where it began. And to me, it was, they worked so hard. There was such nuance and such intelligence to the writing. It was so well done. And then it all culminated with just kind of a fizzle. And I think that the other thing is there's so many weird, like, I don't want to be this rude about it. I don't know how else to describe it other than like lazy writing moments. And I know it can't have been that, because these writers have earned my trust so much. But when they're all like, Daredevil did this, and he's like, that's not Daredevil, that is. And like that moment to me captured what didn't work about that final episode, because it was such a, yeah, I know we spent all season building up to this giant breakdown of Daredevil's credibility and his status as a hero, and exploring, does the suit mean anything to Matt? Can he just be this guy in a black suit? And then, a single line of dialogue and it's all gone. Everyone trusts him again. And there were too many things like that, and it's like, I need this show about lawyers to decide what is adequate to put a person in jail, because I have seen them gather way more concrete evidence on people than they had on Fisk's wife at the end there, and be like, oh yeah, Fisk is just going to get that taken care of. There's no way that's admissible in court. And then they get this hearsay, oh, she killed somebody, and we're done, And it's like, there we go, we got her. Yep, she can go to jail, and that's all we need to keep Fisk in jail. And so to me, it was just too much. The episode was too much centered around putting the pieces back on the board the way they were before, and less about giving us a payoff that had been earned so beautifully. So is the destination what I expected? I don't know. I didn't know what to expect from the end game here. I didn't know if he was going to stay Daredevil. I didn't know how it was going to go. At one point I thought maybe Karen was going to die. I had no idea where I thought this was going. And I don't mind where it landed. I just mind that it just felt so... it just didn't feel like they really did anything with all of that real estate that they got a hold of, And so it's not so much the destination as just the execution there.
Yeah, I think the way you captured of saying the way they just were positioning all the pieces only to pick them up and put them back exactly where they started. I think that's an apt way to say it, because the thing I kept coming back to was just the tonal difference. But I think anything that I could say about the striking difference in tone is better captured with the way you said it, because basically what it is, as you said, we had 12 episodes of incredible visceral realism and nuanced storytelling, a very intentional pace, and those sorts of things. It just felt very, very lived in and very actual, which is fine. I'm all for it. I'm 100% going to buy into that as long as it's done well, and it was done well. And what's a problem with the 13th episode? It was the exact opposite of that. It was on the nose. It was quick. It was convenient.
Yeah.
It was campy as far as the conclusions that were drawn and the circumstances that were made, like those sorts of things. It's just, the reason it sticks out is not because it was a season finale. It sticks out because it was a lone episode that was, it's not made of the same cloth as the rest of the season, and the tonal difference was just far too staggering to leave alone. Like, you have to comment on it if you're going to comment on this season, and I just think it's a very fascinating pivot for them to make for that. I don't think that that's going to be the direction that the potential fourth season goes, but it was just a very fascinating series of choices that they made to tie that whole thing up. But Eric Olson did say on Twitter, was it last week, that he has officially pitched Daredevil Season 4 to Netflix. Like,
and that was something I wanted to get into, is how sure are we that season 4 is even going to happen? And did they maybe wrap it up the way they did because they felt like if it like, do you think maybe they put the toys back in the box just in case playtime's over?
I mean, man, I am such an ill-informed person on this, and most people
well,
are.
We did a whole episode about how little we know,
Yeah,
so
right. So trust us, we're not doctors. But there isn't very much in the way of what's going on with the Disney bit and the Marvel Netflix bit and everything, as far as what's going to happen to these properties. So the convenient answer for me would be to say, yes, Jake, you're absolutely right. They're putting all the toys back in the box just in case. But at the same time, like, I feel like that's probably the only conclusion we can draw, since there's a whole lot of nothing that we can read about right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But clearly Olsen has a clear vision for season 4. Otherwise he wouldn't have been pitching it to the Netflix team already. I mean, so if he tweeted about it last week, so he pitched it last week, which was 2 weeks after the show was put up on Netflix. So, like, I mean, it's not like I don't know. He's making a push to finish it the way that he wants to, but at the same time, that doesn't necessarily mean that season 3's closer wasn't influenced, at least in part, by the pending schism of Disney and Netflix.
Yeah, I do want to really emphasize, because I try to stay away from my trusted sources until after we record, because I'm so afraid of accidental plagiarism. And that's just from somebody who's in grad school. That, hey, by the way, congrats, summa cum laude. But I
read a few books.
Yeah, listeners, you are listening to the sultry tones of an educated man on the other end there. So if somebody who's walking by right now and says, "What the heck are you listening to?" you can say, "The smartest podcast I have, thanks to Mitch."
And by that, I mean, I just got a really expensive piece of paper.
Gosh, what point was I about to make? No, I think that, one thing, though, that I fear people are going to be saying, because I do try to stay away from my sources until usually, like, as soon as we finish recording an episode, I'll go have a bunch of things that I've been saving, and I'll go read through them to see if others felt the same way I did. But one of my concerns is that people are going to say the ending was too happy for Daredevil, because we typically think of Daredevil as one of Marvel's darkest stories. And I hope that's not the perspective that's being taken, because a lot of the best Daredevil stories, including Born Again, which is the one that inspired this season and arguably the darkest of Daredevil stories, end on a very optimistic note. And Daredevil can and does frequently work as a more optimistic comic. It just wades through a lot of darkness to get there. And so I don't, and I know I said this earlier, but I really want to emphasize, I don't have a problem with where it ended. I love, actually, just on a very selfish personal level, I really get invested in characters sometimes. And I really am glad to see Matt make up with Foggy and with Karen, and to see Nelson and Murdock reopen is a really great thing that I enjoyed. I was happy to see all that. It's just, for me,
on a certain level, you have to have some sort of sentimentality there, because part of the core value system of Daredevil is the fact that he is loyal to his people. And of course, there's going to be disruption to that as stories go along, because you can't have a good story without conflict and things being disrupted. But at the same time, like, it's a superhero story, especially in the Marvel world. And it's okay to have a little bit of that sentimentality. I'm 100% there with you. Like, when they open the practice back up again, it's just kind of like, yeah, get the gang back together, guys. Yeah, do it.
It just felt good.
What I find interesting is this concept of, this is one thing I keep coming back to, and I think they've written about it a few times on Vulture. Like you, I haven't read too much in depth, a little bit more than you have probably. I've done more skimming than anything, but I've probably read a little bit more than you, because I know you like to try to keep a lid on it until you've actually seen the whole thing. But I guess I'm interested to hear your take, because like you said, you're really into characters, and the portrayal of Matt Murdock is phenomenal. Like, I don't think they could have gotten a better actor to play him.
Oh, agreed.
And the writing for the actual story arcs is phenomenal, and the tone of the show is phenomenal. But what I find interesting is, if we're just looking at Matt Murdock's character evolution in a vacuum over the course of 3 seasons, it's a really long origin story, right? Like, yeah. I guess maybe here's what I want to do, Jack. I want to ask you, what do you make of that approach? Did you ever find yourself growing tired of it? Did you think it was kind of inventive and refreshing to have that portion of a character still be up in the air, so to speak, continually, or was it kind of played out? Like, because I feel like the core function of his character arc in each of the 3 seasons is, I don't know if I should lean into this or not. And on the surface, if you were to say just anecdotally about any like sort of superhero type character and say, okay, the main struggle is he has these abilities and he has this passion about defending people, but he doesn't know if he should lean into the vigilante justice or not. And it's a struggle of the duality of his soul, so to speak. Right. And you're like, yeah, that sounds really, really good. And then if I were to tell you, like, that's going to be the core struggle of this character over the course of 36 episodes, you would probably be like,
well, that's not 36 episodes of half an hour each week on the CW either. That's 36 hour-long episodes on Netflix.
Exactly. And I think they've done it as well as they possibly could, considering that they literally milked every single last drop out of that inner conflict. So I'm not saying I'm unhappy with it. I think it's a fascinating conversation piece, just because it is a subtle but incredibly bold move that I don't think many people are talking about, but it just seemed really glaring to me. So I'm going to give you the floor, and you give me your thoughts.
Well, I mean, I've made no secret on here of my exhaustion with origin stories. Especially for characters that we've seen before. Now, Daredevil doesn't exactly fall into the Batman, Spider-Man, that group where it's like, like we've said, like, dear God help me if I have to watch the Waynes get gunned down in Crime Alley one more time. But at the same time,
or one more Uncle Ben fatal shooting.
Good Lord, right? Like the next time somebody shoots that poor old man. And so but I do want to say I think they have done it brilliantly, and I've said I thought season 2 was good, but a bit of a step back. Season 3, I think, is the best that they've done yet. And I do think they've handled it well. I want to contend that as I've, over the last almost year we've been doing this, I think I've reflected a lot on on my thoughts as far as these characters go. I think part of my personal disappointment with the obsession we get sometimes with origin stories is how much they don't ring true to the human experience, right? And I'm going to get real deep on this one in the nature of fiction, but as somebody that
gather around, y'all, we're taking a deep dive with Mr. Jake.
I try to read a lot, and I try to read not just comics but novels and other things, and I think that a story that is just the origin of this one character, it reduces the character to a single event or a single sequence of events, when in reality, the best characters are very human and identifiable in that they continue to grow. And the best characters are in a constant state of origin, right? They're not static. And I even mentioned last time we were talking about Daredevil that to me, part of what made Daredevil the hero and Kingpin the villain is that Kingpin has accepted this static view of himself, whereas Daredevil is willing to continue exploring who he is. So I say all of that to say I really think they've handled it well, this origin story. I would like to see them move to new ground, though. I really want to respectfully say that they have proven me wrong. They have shown that there is still some new ground we can cover in an origin, but I want to see what happens when they stop, when they let Matt Murdock move out of adolescence, right? Because really, ultimately, a superhero in his origin is always an adolescent, even if that's not their age, because they're always having that, oh, who am I? Oh, I'm so angry. I don't want to be this. And it's that pure emotion without a lot of guidance and without a lot of direction. And I want to see them let Matt grow up a little bit and let him move into a more stable stage of his career where he's like, hey, he's seen for himself that there are other people that are doing this hero thing and they're maintaining some kind of a life. So he clearly sees that it can be attempted if not completed. I'd like to see him move into that stage where it's not this complete back and forth, can I be Daredevil, can I be Matt Murdock, but maybe it's more of an exploration of what it means to be both Daredevil and Matt Murdock, and maybe we look at a more grown-up approach to it than this constant push all my friends away, bring them all back in, push all my friends away, and there's a lot of value to that, and it's been done so well, but I want to see us break some new ground.
Exactly. Just because it's been done really well, and we've even been proven wrong on how much mileage they could get out of it, doesn't mean we want to see more. I don't know. I don't want, if season 4 gets greenlit, I don't want it to be weaker simply because they didn't give themselves enough real estate to explore more than just the should I wear the black costume or the red.
Right.
So, and again, that's an oversimplification. I don't want to get down on the road of thinking that people think that, we're hating on the show, because I friggin' love the show. So Jake, D'Onofrio goes straight up full Kingpin by the end of this season. He is
it's 100%. Beautiful.
Yeah. So give it to me. You loved it, right?
I really need, I don't know how they would do it, but I'm sure they can figure something out. I need to see him be the core villain in a Spider-Man film opposite Tom Holland. I need that brought to reality. D'Onofrio has said he wants to do it. I know that maybe there's, to some people, a tonal disconnect between Spider-Man Homecoming and Daredevil on Netflix, but I'm telling you, you marry those things perfectly. You let D'Onofrio bring the darkness, you let Tom Holland bring the levity, and you put it together, and I'm telling you, it would be a thing of beauty right there. And I need it.
It could be, and tonally, there may actually be a little bit stronger connection there than some people may think. Because as soon as you said that, I instantly went to the prom sequence in Homecoming, because that exchange in the car is about as dark of a single scene as you're going to get tonally in an MCU type of movie.
Yeah.
but it was done really well and it wasn't campy. And that was by far and away in my top 10 favorite scenes of the year last year. Like it was done really, really well. So like if you had a way to bring, a little bit more of that consistently into the film while still writing in the way that makes Tom Holland really flex what he's good at. I'm right there with you, because comic speaking, there's plenty of real estate there to choose from. Prime,
oh my gosh, yeah.
Prime real estate. So they don't need to go far for inspiration. So they just need to make sure that they've got the right person establishing the tone. And I think it could be done really well, because at the end of the day, this is what we want, right? Like, okay, in the danger of trying to submit everything to a formula, it's not a coincidence that, generically speaking, the comic book movies that people love the most are the ones that have great heroes and great villains. Like,
yeah,
that may seem like a duh moment, but there have been plenty of mediocre and less than mediocre movies that can't figure that portion out, right? So Black Panther, we went on that whole bit about how you could make the argument that Killmonger was actually the most interesting character in the movie. Dark Knight with Heath Ledger's Joker, like, duh. And we talked about Thanos in Infinity War, even with the flaws that Infinity War has. Like, Josh Brolin's performance as Thanos was maybe the best non-Andy Serkis like CGI performance that movies have ever seen. These sorts of things are key. And Keaton obviously was able to carry his portion of Spider-Man Homecoming. Like, these are things that are true. It's like Batman Returns is one I revisit all the time, but it's like Michelle Pfeiffer and Danny DeVito bringing the heat. Like, you're not. And so that, as far as just the formula is concerned, that checks the boxes, because as we have discussed before, D'Onofrio as the Kingpin is about as perfect of a marriage as you can get with actor and villain character.
Yeah. And I, to echo something from earlier, no character more than any other, and this is part of why I love him so much, wades through the darkness to get to the optimism quite like Spider-Man. And the reality is that while we always think of him as the wisecracking character, his stories often carry a lot of darkness and a lot of weight to them. And I think a ground level character like Kingpin, who makes things so personal, who is so dark and so willing to take things to a really psychological place, I think you could get some really good stuff out of that. All that being said, Marvel's not taking my calls anymore, so I know that they're not necessarily looking for that idea. They know that we all want it. I think that
it is Thanksgiving. They're probably out of the office. Did you get a bounce back email?
Well, and I honestly, I think Feige's got my picture up like a do not, admit this man kind of thing. But I think that I'm going to voice a concern, and then I'm going to try and back off of concerns and problems, because I really do want to talk about everything I loved here. I want to voice the concern. What if this show can't be perfect without D'Onofrio and Charlie Cox both? And what if part of why season 2 felt like a step back is because even when you have something as awesome as what they did with Punisher, it's not enough to do what Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio do together? Because think about how few scenes they shared together this season, and yet they played off of one another, and they just had so much chemistry without really being on screen together that often. And it's such a unique thing that you don't see that often. And I have some, not major, because I think good writing is good writing, but I do have some concern about, if Kingpin is not the villain next season, what's it going to be like quality-wise? Are we going to step back to season 2 and that never-ending slog with the Hand? I don't know.
That's fair to ask. I would counter by saying, so far what we have seen is, if season 2 is the closest thing to mediocrity that Daredevil is going to get, then it's still better than the best of Luke Cage and Iron Fist.
Agreed. And that's a really good point.
And it's still a season 2 of Daredevil is still in the conversation with the Jessica Jones bit, I think. So I guess I say that to say, I trust the showrunners, I trust the writers, and I trust that season 4, if it gets greenlit, would be worth my time, and I would feel grateful that I watched it. I guess I can still say that I share your sentiment, that I hope that it still reaches the high standards that season 3 has set, because who wouldn't want more of something awesome if they know that the something more is coming?
Yeah, I know. I think you make a really good point there, that if 2 is the low point for this thing, then clearly we don't have a ton to worry about with this show.
Exactly. It's like, it's Godfather Part 3. It still got nominated for Best Picture, and it's still part of the iconic trio, and it's still worth watching, and it's still a good movie. So if that's the worst that it gets, then you're doing all right.
Yeah, no joke.
Okay, so tell me, other than D'Onofrio, obviously, because he just wins the whole thing, what did you like most about the second half of the season, or just the whole season?
One thing that I really liked is that while I missed Matt Murdock, and I do hope that in the future, I want to see more of Matt in the courtroom. I want to see more of that guy who defends the innocent by day and night. But all that being said,
look at you with your heart of gold.
Right? Nah. And no, but all that being said, removing the Matt Murdock piece of the character for most of this season did allow us to give some extra time to Foggy and Karen. And I thought that while they have been good characters in the past, and even great ones in bursts, they've been limited. And that this season we really got to see, especially Foggy, went from lovable sidekick to really, I don't know, he just felt more developed to me as a character. I'm like,
he was three-dimensional for the first time.
Yeah, he could breathe a little bit, and I've not minded Foggy the way that other people. It feels like there's a real movement against Foggy Nelson sometimes. I mean,
it's the internet, Jake. People have to hate on something.
Oh, exactly, right.
He's an easy target.
I'm just like, he was a Bash brother. What more do you want? But I think that
the original Bash brother,
when he was the Bash bro,
Fulton Reed, man, Fulton friggin' Reed. And if you don't get that reference, then get off the podcast right now.
Then turn 30, you monster. I think that I really enjoy, and that extended to Dex or Bullseye, that extended to Vanessa. It extended to all these different people, where we really got to see a lot of these characters inhabit their world and live in it more. And I hope that they will be able to keep that going next season, wherever we're headed next season, whatever stories they want to adapt. I really hope that they will be able to take those characters and keep them alive and keep them growing, even if they did revert a little bit to the mean at the end of this season.
I think that's totally fair. I guess that's maybe part of the dichotomy, right? Is Matt alienated everyone around him, but then because they weren't sharing so much screen with Matt, and they weren't completely tied to Matt's, nuclear storyline, it did provide them a little bit more space to, as you said, grow and breathe, which I think is, any good writing is going to take advantage of opportunities to take meaningful characters and make them more meaningful if they can. So, that's paint by numbers, but it's done really, really well. One of my interesting takeaways is that I was very underwhelmed with the final fight sequence in the last episode.
Yeah.
Compared to the fight sequences that we had earlier. It's not like that it was bad. I just was like, I don't know. Or maybe I'm asking the show to be too self-aware and I need to take a back seat to it. But I'm like, you put all the eggs in so many other baskets that you finally got to the last payoff, and it was almost like, we ran out of plays in the playbooks.
Yeah,
I thought that was really interesting.
Well, and I think that some of it is the very nature of putting something like the prison scene where it belongs, might I add, in the middle of the show. Is that
it was so amazing? Just have to say that again.
It's just incredible. And when you put that fight scene in there, you do establish an unreasonable standard that you can't continue to live up to.
But symphonic. That's what it was. It was a symphony of blood.
It really, man, it was the most beautiful violence I have ever witnessed. And I think that, but maybe finding the second best fight scene and putting it at the end, it does feel like sometimes with these shows we get, and it's good that we're taking characterization seriously. I don't want to go back to the old days. I don't want to start treating these guys as just Saturday morning cartoon characters all the time. But sometimes I feel like we get so caught up on the character arc that we do maybe forget that this is ultimately a story about people that are going to solve their problems with punches. And unless you're going to make a statement about the very nature of that, which I don't know that they were trying to do here, I do think that you should probably invest a little bit in having a really good punch at the end.
So, Daredevil Season 3, best of the Daredevil run so far, or second best?
I'd say it's the best. I think that, as much as I'm whining about the finale, I do think it was a really good season. And that last episode is the only, while I did not like it, it was the only thing below an A+ for me. So I'm going to say it's the best season so far, and it'll be a hard one to top. But even if they don't top it, to just stay in that neighborhood would be awesome.
So what would you want to see in season 4? Give me like one or two things.
Okay, so man, this is tough because we're starting to hit a lot of the best known Daredevil stories, because as long running as this character is, if at least in the big picture, the really well known stories, we've hit most of them now. I personally, and I don't know how this would really fit with what they've done. So this is not so much a true wish as just what I think would be really cool. There's a story that's fairly recent, probably about 5-6 years ago, where Daredevil moves to San Francisco. And it doesn't necessarily need to take a San Francisco move. That doesn't need to be where this goes. But just the tone of it goes from, it takes all of Daredevil's past. It's very brilliantly done. And it takes the fact that Daredevil has always been such a dark comic, and it uses that to do a little bit of meta commentary where it pulls Matt Murdock out of his depression, and it moves him from this really dark character to, he acknowledges that he's got a history of depression and of getting down in the dumps, and he decides he's not going to let that be him anymore, and he starts exploring, how am I going to get healthier mentally? And you start to see Daredevil smile a little bit, and you see him start to maintain some healthy relationships, including with Foggy, who is at the time, I believe, on the run from Kingpin, and they fake his death. It's pretty cool. There's just this, it gets described a lot as a swashbuckling story. It really kind of harkens back to sort of an Errol Flynn thing where Daredevil is the hero swinging in to save the day. But in all of that, it goes to some really dark places to explore mental health. And I think I would love to see something like that. It doesn't have to be that story. He doesn't have to go to San Francisco, but I would love to see them kind of look at it from that angle where he's going to pull himself out of his funk, but acknowledge the reality that that's not how that works. You don't just decide I'm going to be happy. You have to make, a conscious effort over a long period of time. And what's more, it has ties to the Purple Man, Kilgrave, and he doesn't have to be alive to use those ties.
And I was just going to say they've gone. Marvel through Netflix has gone down this path a little bit with Jessica Jones season 2, and we kind of talked about how there was a lack of a traditional villain, and the villain was a system in and of itself. And much of the commentary, which we both thought was very well done, was around the concept of what is well, what is unwell, what are you responsible for, what can you do, and what mental illness means to other people, and the people that recognize it and the people that don't recognize it, and all the ramifications of that. I think that's a playground for comic books and superheroes and vigilantes in general that I think is an easy one for them to play in as far as still being able to provide the kind of social commentary that we love the art form for, but still ripe with realistic but still unpredictable types of conflict. And so I agree with you. I would love to see something like that. And it seems to be a precedent there just within the Defenders universe anyway. And like you said, the connections to the Purple Man, I mean, that it's there. So anything that can help Matt break free from the concept of just like, okay, I'm going to brood for 10 episodes about why I don't know if I should be Matt Murdock or if I should be Daredevil or not. This is a good way, because if he's grappling with a deep-seated thing that he cannot control, that he was born with, that's completely different than struggling with a choice. And then tying that with the Errol Flynn-ness, as you would so aptly discuss. And if you don't know what that reference is, then please use the Google. But then it allows him to have those quote unquote swashbuckling moments of just being the vigilante that comes in and have those highly entertaining moments of him earning his hero stripes. There's something to be said of having the right amount of camp and the right amount of formula in there, because those things exist for a reason in the genre anyway. And if you can do that on top, putting that on top of a narrative that is real and socially timely and immersive at the same time, I think would then balance it out. But then again, I mean, Olsen's not going to give us a call. We're not going to be the showrunners of season 4, no matter how hard we lobby. So you never know.
Well, and so let me just make the plug to our listeners that also are readers or aspire to be. If you're looking to expand your Daredevil knowledge a little with something less well known but more recent, it's from 2013. The run that I'm talking about, it starts with a number 1, so it's a good jumping on point. It's by Mark Waid and Chris Samney, and the art is up to par with the writing, which is an awesome thing. So yeah, just a little plug there for someone who doesn't necessarily need my help. But Mark Waid and Chris Samney's Daredevil in San Francisco is a really great run that is both really fun and really poignant. Really one of my favorite runs of the last decade, honestly. So I would love to see just some inspiration taken from that.
100%. All right. I've tried really hard the last couple days to come up with a clear answer to the question of, do I think Daredevil is the best of the Defenders universe, and do I think season 3 is the best season of them all? And it depends on the day, and I just want to flip a coin. I love Jessica Jones so much, and that first season of Jessica Jones was just as close to perfect as you can get, as far as I'm concerned. But as we've unpacked in previous episodes, it scratches both of my itches with the concept of like wanting to dive into the comic book lore, but then still loving art house cinema and being a cinephile at the same time. And just is both so well. So I don't know if I can definitively pick, but I can honestly say that, man, season 3 of Daredevil was mostly killer, no filler. It's just about as good as comic book television or just straight up action-based television in the prestige sector can get.
Well, and this is the best thing I can say about it, is even if you're going to accept my position that the last episode was genuinely bad, that would still leave less bad and more good than in 95% of the things I've watched this year. And, so don't take my feelings on the last episode to mean in any way, shape, or form that this season is not worth the ride, bumps and all, because that last bump is the only bump, guys. It's 12 darn near perfect episodes, and one that just didn't quite stick the landing. And that's an achievement that is not to be laughed at. That is not a small thing. And I am going to say I still hold Jessica Jones just a little bit above it, and we could do a whole episode on why I think that is. But I also understand that to get there I have to split hairs. So yeah, I'm right there with you. It's so good. It's so good. If you haven't watched it yet, and for some reason you've listened to these episodes, go watch it. Even if you know how it's going to end now, you really owe it to yourself.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I want season 4 to happen so badly, just because I want another season of it, and I want one more season of Jessica Jones. You know that TV shows aren't going to last for forever, and you never know what's going to happen. But at the same time, I feel like we deserve closure as people who are devoted fanboys of these two phenomenal television series. Please give those to me. I just want season 3 of JJ and season 4 of DD, and I will be happy until I'm not anymore. I can promise that. I can promise that.
That's well said. We're going to be happy until we aren't.
Well, anyway, folks, enjoy your Thanksgiving, or if you have already enjoyed your Thanksgiving, then take a nap. You deserve it. And hit us up on Twitter. We want to know what you thought about Daredevil Season 3. We are on Twitter at WatchComicsPod. That's comics with an X, WatchComicsPod. And give us a rate and a review on iTunes. One, because it helps other people discover us so they can hear the magical, soothing voices of Jake and Mitch, but also so they can join our cool community of online people that we love interacting with, because we think you're cool and there's more cool people like you out there. They deserve to know who we are, don't they? I thought so. Glad we had this chat. And major thanks and shout out to the GeekDad Podcast Network. We love calling you home.
Yeah, always.
All right. We'll hit you up next week.
See you then.
This podcast has been a production of the GeekDad Podcast Network. If you've enjoyed this content, please consider supporting us at patreon.com/geekdad.